I remember the exact moment I stood up from that table. The restaurant was one of those upscale downtown places in Chicago, dim lighting, soft jazz, wine glasses that cost more than a week's groceries when I was younger. It was our 12-year anniversary dinner. 12 years of marriage. 12 years of shared bills, shared silence, shared dreams that slowly stopped sounding like dreams. My wife, Lena, looked stunning that night. She always did when she wanted to. Black dress, subtle gold jewelry, hair perfectly done like she had spent more time getting ready for the world than for me. She smiled at me across the table, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached anything real anymore. Still, I tried. I always tried. When the waiter brought the bill, I didn't even hesitate. I just nodded and said, "I'll take care of it." It was habit now, not just paying for dinner, paying for everything that had quietly been slipping away between us. Lena barely looked up from her phone. That should have told me everything already. But I stood anyway. I adjusted my jacket, gave her a small glance, and said I'd be right back. She gave a half nod, not even a full response, just a flick of acknowledgement like I was an errand, not a husband. And I walked away. If I had known that 5 minutes would change the entire shape of my life, I might have sat back down. I might have asked one more question. I might have fought for something I didn't even realize I was already losing. But I didn't. The hallway to the front counter was quiet, too quiet for a place that expensive. I remember the soft carpet under my shoes, the faint smell of expensive perfume and grilled steak mixing in the air. I remember thinking about how tired I was. Not physically, something deeper. The kind of tired that lives in your chest. At the payment counter, the transaction took longer than it should have. The card machine lagged. The receipt printer jammed once. The employee apologized twice. I smiled like it didn't matter. But my mind wasn't there. My mind was already halfway back to the table. Back to Lena. I don't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was that small, nagging feeling I had learned to ignore over the last year, the feeling that something in my marriage was no longer mine to understand. When the receipt finally printed, I took it, nodded, and turned back. That's when I heard it. At first, it was just voices. Faint, coming from near our table down the corridor. I slowed down without realizing it. Then I recognized hers. Lena. And she wasn't alone. I stopped walking. There's a kind of silence your body creates when it realizes something before your mind does. My feet froze first, then my hands, then my breathing turned shallow, like my lungs didn't trust the air anymore. I stepped closer, just enough to see around the corner. Our table was partially hidden behind a decorative divider. I could see her clearly now. And I saw him. A man I recognized. Ethan Caldwell. Her coworker. The same man she had late meetings with. The same man she laughed a little too easily around whenever I picked her up from work events. The same man she once told me, very casually, is just ambitious and intense, nothing more. Nothing more. That phrase echoed in my head like it was laughing at me. They were leaning slightly toward each other, too close for comfort, too familiar for strangers. Lena's hand was resting near her wine glass, but she wasn't drinking. She was talking. And smiling. That smile again. But this time, I heard her voice. Soft, lowered, not meant for anyone else in the restaurant. "I can't keep doing this double life," she said. My stomach tightened. Ethan leaned in closer. I couldn't hear his exact words, but I saw his expression, confident, calm, like someone who had already won something and was just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. Then Lena laughed quietly. A sound I hadn't heard directed at me in a long time. "I know," she continued. "He still thinks we're fine. He still plans everything like we're normal." Normal. That word hit harder than anything else. Ethan said something again. This time I caught a fragment. After the anniversary. Lena hesitated, just for a second. Then she nodded. And that nod, small, subtle, almost invisible, felt like a door closing somewhere inside my life. I stepped back immediately. Not because I was afraid of being seen, but because something inside me cracked so cleanly, I couldn't stand still. My hand went to the wall instinctively. I remember the texture under my fingers, cold, real, unlike everything I thought I knew for the past 12 years. I had come here thinking we were celebrating survival. Instead, I had walked into confirmation. The restaurant noises around me returned in pieces, clinking glasses, distant laughter, the soft hum of conversations that had nothing to do with me. I stood there in that corridor like I had been erased from my own story. 12 years. And I wasn't even part of her truth anymore. I don't know how long I stood there, maybe seconds, maybe minutes. Time stopped behaving normally after that moment. Then I did something I didn't expect from myself. I walked back. Not to the table, but to the exit. Outside, the Chicago air hit me like a slap. Cold, sharp, real. Cars passed, people laughed on the sidewalk. Life continued like nothing had just been rewritten inside me. I stood under the glow of the restaurant sign and finally let myself breathe fully. My phone buzzed. Once. Then again. Lena. I looked at the screen but didn't open it. For the first time in years, I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stared at the reflection of myself in the dark glass window. A man in a suit. A man who had just paid for a dinner, celebrating a marriage that apparently ended long before tonight. And I asked myself a question I wasn't ready for. How long had I been the only one trying? I didn't go back inside. That was the first decision I made that actually felt like mine. Instead, I stood outside the restaurant, watching the glass doors like they belonged to someone else's life. Warm light spilled through them every time someone entered or left, carrying laughter, conversation, the normal rhythm of a world that hadn't just been split open. My phone kept buzzing. Lena. Again. And again. I finally turned it face down in my palm like it was something dangerous. Not because I was afraid of her, because I didn't trust myself to look at her name without breaking in a way I couldn't control. The wind picked up along the street. Chicago at night always felt like it was breathing through concrete lungs, cold, heavy, alive in a way that didn't care what you were going through. I leaned against a streetlight and tried to process what I had heard. Double life. That's what she called it. Not a mistake, not confusion, not something temporary or innocent. A life. And I was the part of it she was tired of carrying. That thought didn't hurt at first. It just felt unreal, like my brain was refusing to translate it properly. Then it hit. Not as emotion. As weight. Like something dropped into my chest and refused to come out. I don't know how long I stood there before I saw movement through the glass again. Lena. She was alone now. Ethan wasn't with her. She looked around the restaurant briefly, then grabbed her purse and stood up. Her posture had changed. The easy smile was gone, replaced with something tighter, controlled, like she was stepping out of one version of herself and into another before leaving the building. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. Lena, where are you? Simple. Normal. Like nothing was happening. Like I hadn't just stood 3 feet away from the truth. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched her walk toward the exit. Every step she took closer made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't explain. Not anger yet, not sadness either. Something in between. Recognition. Like I was finally seeing her, without the filter I had worn for years. She stepped outside and froze when she saw me. For a second, neither of us moved. The city noise filled the space between us, horns, footsteps, distant sirens, but it felt muted, like we were inside a bubble that only held unfinished conversations. Why are you standing out here? She asked. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Like she had already rehearsed this moment. I didn't answer immediately, I just looked at her. Really looked. The same woman I had built a life with. The same woman I had defended in conversations, supported through promotions, held during losses she cried about at 2 a.m. And now she looked at me like I was a situation she needed to manage. I came back, I said finally. That was all. Her eyes flickered for a moment, just a tiny break in her composure. Then it was gone. Oh, she said softly, I was looking for you. A pause. A lie shaped like concern. I almost laughed, almost. Instead, I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said, I heard you. That's when something changed in her face. Not panic. Calculation. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. What do you mean? I should have shouted. I should have asked her directly. I should have broken the silence between us wide open right there on the sidewalk. But I didn't. Because I wanted to see how far she would go before truth became unavoidable. I mean, I said quietly, I heard enough. Silence. Her eyes searched mine now sharper. Where? She asked. And I almost respected how controlled she was. Almost. By the table, I said. That did it. A small shift, not obvious to anyone else, but I saw it. A tightening around her jaw, a fraction of a second where her breathing changed. Then she exhaled. Slowly. Like she was choosing a version of reality. You misunderstood, she said. There it was. The beginning of rewriting. I was talking about work, she continued. Ethan's project he's under a lot of pressure right now. I watched her carefully. Every word she spoke sounded practiced. Not spontaneous. Not real. You said double life, I replied. That stopped her. For half a second too long. Then she shook her head lightly, almost offended. You're taking things out of context. I felt something shift inside me again. This time it wasn't confusion. It was clarity. Sharp. Clean. Dangerous. Lena, I said quietly. She looked at me. And I realized something I hadn't noticed before. She wasn't afraid of being caught. She was afraid of being forced to explain. I'm not stupid, I said. That line landed heavier than I expected. Her eyes narrowed slightly. I didn't say you were. But she didn't deny it again. Not fully. A taxi passed behind us, headlights sweeping over both of our faces for a second. In that flash of light, I saw everything more clearly than I had in years. Distance. Disconnection. A marriage that had become a performance on her side, and a routine on mine. I just wanted tonight to be normal, she said finally. That word again. Normal. I let out a slow breath. Nothing about tonight is normal, I replied. Silence stretched between us. Longer this time. Heavier. Then she looked away for the first time. Not at me. Past me. Like she was already thinking about where this conversation needed to end, not what it meant. I'm tired, she said softly. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. Not because she was tired, but because she said it like I was part of what exhausted her. Like I was the weight she wanted to put down. She stepped back slightly. I think we should go home, she added. Home. That word felt strange now. Like a place I used to know. I didn't move immediately. I just stood there under the streetlight, watching the woman I loved try to guide us back into a version of life that no longer existed. And for the first time in 12 years, I didn't follow her lead. She started walking before I agreed. That told me more than anything else she had said. Not a request, not a conversation, a direction. Like I was still part of a life she expected to continue on her terms. I stayed still for a moment, watching her heels click against the pavement, steady and confident. She didn't look back, not once. That should have hurt. But it didn't land like pain anymore. It landed like confirmation. I finally followed, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to understand something I had avoided for too long. The drive home was silent. She sat in the passenger seat, looking out the window like the city held answers she didn't want to say out loud. I kept both hands on the wheel, eyes forward, but my mind wasn't on the road. It was replaying everything. The restaurant. Her voice. Double life. Ethan's name. The way she didn't deny it properly. Every memory I thought was solid now felt like it had been built on shifting ground. At one red light, my phone lit up again in the cup holder. I didn't check it. Lena noticed anyway. You're not answering your phone, she asked casually. I didn't look at her. Should I be? I replied. Silence. Then she sighed softly, like I was making things more complicated than necessary. We'll talk at home, she said. That phrase again. Talk at home. Like home was still a place where truth lived. When we got back, the house felt different. Same walls, same furniture, same soft hallway light I used to find comforting after long days. But tonight, it felt staged. Like a set built around a life that had already finished filming. Lena went straight upstairs. No hesitation. No glance back. I stayed in the living room. Didn't follow. Didn't move. Just stood there, slowly taking in details I had ignored for years. The framed photos on the wall, the anniversary trips, the birthdays, smiles captured in moments that now felt like evidence from a case I hadn't known I was part of. My phone buzzed again. This time I picked it up. A message from her. Lena, don't make this into something it is. I stared at the screen. Something it is. That line. That was the final layer of denial. Not just denial of events. Denial of reality itself. I put the phone down and walked upstairs. She was in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, heels off now, posture slightly slumped. The version of her from the restaurant was gone. This one looked tired, not emotional, just worn down in a way that suggested she had been carrying something heavy for a long time. Are you going to say it? She asked without looking at me. My hand rested on the doorframe. I want the truth, I said. She finally looked up. And for the first time tonight, her expression wasn't controlled. It was defensive. There is no dramatic truth, she said quickly. You saw me talking to a coworker, that's it. A pause. And you walked away with your own assumptions. I stepped into the room slowly. Assumptions don't sound like double life, Lena. That made her flinch just slightly. Then she stood up. People say things, she snapped. You know that. You heard half a conversation and decided to build a story around it. I studied her face. She wasn't scared. She was cornered. Those are different things. I didn't hear half a conversation, I said quietly. I heard you say you're tired of this life. I heard you say I think everything is normal. Her jaw tightened. And you think that means what you want it to mean, she shot back. There it was again. Control over meaning. Not denial of words, control of interpretation. I nodded slowly. Then explain it, I said. Silence. Longer this time. Heavier. She looked away. That was the first real crack. I'm overwhelmed, she said finally, quieter now. Work is intense. He's just someone I talk to about it, that's all. But she didn't meet my eyes when she said it. And I noticed something else. She didn't say we're just friends. She said that's all. Carefully avoiding definition. Avoiding clarity. I took a step closer. Do you love me? I asked. The question hit the room differently. Everything else paused around it. Even her breathing changed. She looked at me sharply now. Don't do that, she said. Answer it. Her silence lasted 3 seconds. Then 5. Then long enough that it became its own answer. I've been stressed, she said finally, softer now. That doesn't mean. Do you love me? I repeated. This time my voice didn't rise. It lowered. That's what made it worse. She exhaled sharply, turning away slightly. I don't know what you want me to say, she muttered. And that was it. That was the moment something inside me stopped trying to hold the marriage together. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Just acceptance. Cold, quiet acceptance. Because if someone can't answer that question after 12 years, then the answer has already been given. I stepped back. She noticed. What are you doing? She asked quickly. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I looked around the room again. At the bed. At the life. At everything that suddenly felt like it belonged to a past version of me. I'm listening, I said quietly. For the first time, I added. And in that silence, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't the one leaving the marriage. I had just finally arrived at the truth of it. She watched me carefully after that. Not like a wife. Not like someone trying to fix something. like someone trying to predict what I would do next. That was new. For 12 years, I had always been the predictable one, the steady one, the one who absorbed tension, smoothed edges, made things work. But something had shifted in me tonight, and she could feel it. I could see it in her eyes. "Can we not do this right now?" she said finally, quieter. "It's late, we're both tired." Tired? Again. That word had become her escape route for everything she didn't want to face. I nodded slowly, but not in agreement. In acknowledgement. "Yeah," I said, "we are tired." I turned toward the bedroom door. She stepped forward slightly. "Where are you going?" I stopped. Not because I owed her an answer, but because I realized she still expected one. "I'm going to the guest room," I said. Silence hit instantly. That small sentence changed the air in the room. Her face shifted just slightly, but enough. Confusion first. Then disbelief. Then something close to irritation. "You're serious?" she asked. I didn't respond. That silence again. She let out a short laugh, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief trying to disguise itself. "You're going to sleep in another room because of a conversation you misunderstood," she said. I turned back toward her slowly. "I didn't misunderstand the feeling," I said. That made her pause. Not the words. The certainty behind them. For the first time tonight, she didn't have an immediate reply. I left the room before she could find one. The guest room hadn't been used in months. Maybe longer. It smelled like still air and forgotten time. I stood in the doorway for a moment before turning on the light. The room was simple, empty in a way that didn't feel temporary anymore. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let my shoulders drop. That's when it hit me. Not everything at once. Not like a breakdown. More like pressure releasing in layers. The restaurant. Her voice. Ethan. The word double life. Her refusal to define anything clearly. And worst of all, the realization that she wasn't confused. She was managing something. Carefully. Strategically. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the floor. My phone buzzed again. I didn't pick it up immediately. Then I did. A message. Not from Lena. From an unknown number. Unknown, asterisk, you should talk to her about Ethan, before it gets worse. My breath stopped. I read it again. Then again. Something cold moved through my chest. I stood up instantly. The room suddenly felt smaller. I typed back. "Me asterisk, who is this?" No response. I tried again. Nothing. Just silence. That silence was different now. It wasn't absence. It felt intentional. I stared at the message for a long time, then walked out of the room and down the hallway. Her bedroom door was closed. I didn't knock. Not yet. Instead, I stood there, staring at the wood like it could explain things for me. Inside, I heard movement. She was still awake. I raised my hand slightly. Then stopped. Because something in me hesitated. Not fear. Control. If I opened that door now, everything would collapse at once. And part of me wasn't ready for that kind of ending. So I walked back to the guest room. And sat again. But I didn't sleep. Morning came without ceremony. No resolution, no clarity, just light filtering through the blinds like nothing had happened. The house looked normal again. That was the strangest part. Normal was still trying to exist. Lena was already in the kitchen when I walked in. Coffee brewing, phone in hand, hair tied back like last night didn't exist. She looked up briefly. "Morning," she said. Simple. Careful. Controlled. I didn't respond right away. I studied her, trying to find something honest in her expression. But she was already good at this. Too good. "You didn't sleep in the room," she said casually. "I did," I replied. A pause. Then she nodded like that information was filed away somewhere unimportant. "I'm going to work early today," she added. Just like that. No continuation of last night. No reopening. No acknowledgement. I took a slow breath. Lena, I said. She looked up again. And I saw it. The slight tension in her shoulders. She knew what was coming. I got a message last night, I said. Her expression didn't change immediately. But something behind her eyes did. From who? She asked. I watched her carefully now. I don't know, I said, but they mentioned Ethan. That name landed differently in daylight. Sharper. More exposed. She stared at me for a moment longer than necessary. Then she turned back to her coffee. That's weird, she said, probably a prank. But her voice was too steady. Too rehearsed. I stepped closer. Is it? She finally exhaled, placing the mug down slightly harder than needed. What do you want from me? She asked, irritation creeping in now. You're taking anonymous messages seriously. I didn't answer immediately. Because I realized something important in that moment. It wasn't the message that mattered. It was her reaction to it. And I had just seen something she didn't want me to see. Fear. Not of the message. Of what it represented. That's when I knew. The conversation I thought I had already started last night had only just begun. She didn't say anything after that. Not immediately. She just picked up her coffee again, took a slow sip, and avoided my eyes like eye contact might turn this into something she couldn't control anymore. That silence between us in the kitchen didn't feel like peace. It felt like a pause before impact. Finally, she placed the mug down with more care this time. I have meetings, she said simply. We can talk later if you still want to keep going with this. Keep going with this. Like it was optional. Like it was a misunderstanding I had chosen to drag forward. I nodded once. Not because I agreed. Because I understood something had crossed a point of no return, and arguing in a kitchen wouldn't fix it. She grabbed her bag, checked her phone, and walked past me toward the door. Then she stopped. Just for a second. I never did anything to hurt you, she said without turning around. No emotion. No crack in her voice. Just a statement she believed, or needed to believe. Then she left. The door clicked shut, and the house became too quiet. I stayed standing in the kitchen for a long time after she was gone. The coffee machine still hissed softly, like it didn't understand the tension it had been brewing into the room. I finally turned it off. Then I sat down at the table. Same table we had used for years. Birthdays, anniversaries, ordinary breakfasts, ordinary lies disguised as ordinary life. I opened my phone again. The unknown message was still there. No follow-up. No explanation. Just that single warning. You should talk to her about Ethan before it gets worse. I stared at Ethan's name longer than I wanted to. Because now it wasn't just a coworker. It wasn't just suspicion. It was a fixed point in a story I hadn't been told fully. And that terrified me more than anything emotional ever had. I opened Lena's contact, hovered over it, then stopped, because I realized something simple but heavy. I didn't trust the next conversation to be honest anymore. Not on either side. And once you reach that point in a marriage, words stop being tools for understanding. They become weapons. I drove to my office that morning without thinking much about the route. Traffic, lights, horns. Everything felt slightly distant, like I was inside my own life, but not fully connected to it anymore. At a red light, I saw a billboard reflection in the car window. A couple smiling. Perfect lighting. Perfect timing. Perfect fiction. I looked away. At work, I didn't tell anyone anything was wrong. People don't notice cracks in men like me easily. We're trained to look fine, even when we're not. I sat in my office, laptop open, staring at emails I wasn't processing. Then my phone rang. Unknown number again. This time I answered immediately. Hello. A pause. Then a voice. Male. Come. Familiar in a way I couldn't place at first. You don't know me, the voice said. My grip tightened on the phone. Then why are you calling me? I asked. Another pause. Then, I work with your wife. My chest tightened instantly. Every sound in the office outside my door faded slightly. I'm not trying to interfere, he continued, but I thought you should know this has been going on longer than you think. My voice lowered. What has been going on? A hesitation. Then the name I already knew. Ethan. I closed my eyes for a second. Not surprise. Confirmation. He continued. They've been close for months, not just work. People have noticed. I didn't know how to say anything until I heard she was still pretending everything at home was normal. That word again. Normal. I leaned back in my chair slowly. And you're telling me this now, why? I asked. A breath on the other end. Because I've seen what it's doing to him too, he said, and I don't think this ends quietly anymore. Then the line went dead. Just like that. No goodbye. No explanation. Only silence. I didn't move for a long time. The office noise outside kept going, phones ringing, people laughing, meetings starting. But inside me, something had fully shifted now. This wasn't confusion anymore. This wasn't suspicion. This was structure. A pattern finally revealing itself. And for the first time since that anniversary dinner, I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was thinking strategically. I looked at my phone again. Then at Lena's last message. Then at the unknown warning. And I realized something I didn't want to accept too quickly. Whatever was happening between Lena and Ethan wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a story already in motion. And I had just been late to the first chapter.